As far as I know, nobody else is said to be in the form of God, but the meaning is quite clear. It's very close to the idea of Adam being an image of God. I gave you a Numbers verse there for your notes. I've forgotten where it was exactly, somewhere in Numbers. Those two words, glory and image and form, are really synonymous, but nobody else, I think, is literally said to be in the form of God, as far as I know.
I would add, actually, if I may, Anthony, you
Cool.
can correct me or anyone else. Isaiah 44:13. Now, this is the Septuagint, the
Yep.
Greek translation,
Yep.
and you do have the same word, morphe,
Mm.
in the form of a man, Isaiah 44:13. Job
Mhm.
4:16. A form was before my eyes.
Mhm.
And Maccabees,
Yep.
although it's extra biblical word, but you also have the word morphe there.
No, that's
I
very good.
Where?
Morphe is a visible thing. The great point about morphe is something you actually see.
Right.
So the notion of a pre-existing Jesus who's invisible as God is out of the question. Morphe is something that you can actually see.
Yes, of course, the Trinitarians, such as Martin Lloyd-Jones, argue that morphe relates to the inner essential essence. And the example that he uses is a lump of iron. He says that's the morphe, is the nature of that piece of metal is iron. And whether I beat that iron into a sword or a plowshare, he says, I haven't changed the essential essence or morphe. But he is absolutely incorrect there. As you've clearly pointed out, morphe is the outward appearance. Whether in biblical language, whether in apocryphal language, whether in post-biblical language, morphe is always relates to the outward appearance. And Jesus certainly, and let's be clear, as biblical Unitarians, we believe that Jesus Christ, when we see him, we do see God at work. When we hear him, we do hear God. And Jesus himself said, the words, they're not mine, but they're my Father's. The works, they're not mine, but they're my Father's. So we need to not detract on the, in our desire for balance, go too far the other way when we kind of reduce Jesus to less than being the morphe of God, the visible expression of God's character and of his purposes and plan.
The only thing I would mention is, as we find to be the case so often, I think that the Trinity and doctrines along that line have been built by people based on splitting hairs, if you will, if we can use that term. And we find in this case that we're taking a word which everybody has to say, well, what does that mean? Well, and this could mean this, and this could, we're all over the board with this. When in reality, I think we wouldn't want to be building a great doctrine, a massive doctrine, the doctrine of Trinity or the deity of Christ, on a word like that, which we still have some room to wonder about. Well, what does that really mean? What does it say? Even the various scholars, the various commentators, often are in disagreement about what is the significance of that. So I would think perhaps, I love what F.F. Bruce said about the Philippians 2 chapter one time, and he's saying, that it causes students to pull out their hair, and we don't, it's just so fraught with issues. Well, are we really going to be building a doctrine, massive doctrine, supposedly that you must believe in order to be saved and all that sort of business, on morphe? What is this? I won't go. I don't think we should go there. It makes no sense to me.
You talked about scholars. Some scholars do agree.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting comment from the ESV Study Bible. Form could also be a reference to Christ being the ultimate image, icon, right? As Anthony was alluding to, the exact imprint of his nature. It's interesting they use that verse, Hebrews 1:3. That word translated nature, if I'm correct, and Anthony can correct me, is the Greek hypostasis, which is used in the Trinitarian formula. 3 hypostases, persons, in one so-called ousia or substance or stuff. Isn't that interesting? So God is a person. Might also refer to the fact that he, Jesus, is the visible expression
Yes.
of God's invisible glory.
Why not? Sounds
So-
good.
Oh, and also I was going to say earlier too, and thanks to Greg for his pointing out about DeBar and this wonderful use of the word and the massive use of it, and which is true. But this, what I was referring to is 400 and something times a study that I did in which I used English translations to focus on those instances in which the word was used in singular and used as parts of speech in which you might have thought this would be capitalized.